In this video, we're going to talk about diagramming verbals and clauses. It's going to progress through a lot of different lessons from near the beginning of your textbook towards the end, but these are all lessons that you only learn in 7th grade. You don't learn these concepts earlier in 6th grade, so if you've taken 6th grade before, these are going to be entirely new to you, even though some of them happen earlier in the book. The first thing you're going to learn about that's new are called gerunds and infinitives. They are they're like a verb, but they act as something else in the sentence. So a gerund acts as a noun and ends in ing. An infinitive has the format of to and then a verb, to go, to play, to be. Those are infinitives. And they can act as all different things in the sentence. Subjects, adjectives, and adverbs. In lesson 19 and 23, you learn about diagramming gerunds and infinitives as the subject of your sentence. So let's look at some examples. Gerunds, you'll notice they're both diagrammed on these sort of stilts. Gerunds have this staircase look, and infinitives almost look like a prepositional phrase with that to on the angled line and the verb on the horizontal line. So let's look here. Running is exhilarating. We have is our verb, and then running is our subject. But we don't diagram it like a normal subject because this is a subject that comes from the verb to run. So the action of running is our subject. So to show that it is an action acting as the subject, we diagram it differently. We still have our subject and verb, always begins with this T shape, with our verb on the right and our subject on the left. But instead of writing running here, we do a shape that looks like this. And we write the word running across it. And then exhilarating, you may not have learned this yet, but it would be a predicate adjective. Which is taught in a little bit later lesson. Now let's look at this one. To win requires dedication. Our verb is requires. What requires dedication? To win. To win would be our subject. In this case, it is that infinitive. Winning is something you can do, so the action of winning is what requires dedication. So we diagram it with our subject on the left and our verb on the right. But in this case, instead of this gerund that has an ing ending, we have an infinitive, which has to at the beginning. We still have our stilt shape, but now we do a prepositional phrase shape. To on the slanted line, win on the horizontal line. And then this word dedication would be our direct object. To win requires what? It requires dedication. Now let's look at one more sentence. Clothing can be expensive. This ends in ing, but clothing isn't taken from some sort of verb. To clothe something is a verb, but in this case, it's just talking about the noun clothing. A piece of clothing that you wear can be expensive. So in this case, this is just a regular sentence with a regular subject and a regular verb. Expensive, you may not have learned yet, is called a predicate adjective and is diagrammed like this. But clothing is not a gerund. It is not coming from a verb. In these ones, this is an actual action. The action of running is exhilarating. This is not an action, the action of clothing. That does not make sense. So here, clothing is just a noun that happens to end in ing. Now let's look at some other things to do with verbals. These words can also be direct objects and predicate nominatives. You would diagram it in the same way, they just appear on a different part of the line. So up here, these were all subjects. Those same shapes can appear as the direct object or the predicate nominative. Here, my favorite pastime is traveling. Is our subject, our verb, and our subject would be pastime. Pastime, meaning like a hobby that you've had. Pastime is. Is a linking verb, so we use a slanted line to show that traveling is our predicate nominative. The pastime is this action of traveling. I like to travel. So we have our stilt shape and our stair shape, and then we write our word traveling across it. Then we have our adjectives as we've practiced in the past. It was my pastime and it was a favorite pastime. So sometimes this could be a helping verb with an action verb, traveling. I am traveling, or he is traveling. In this case, it's a linking verb connecting the two together. Pastime and traveling are the same thing. Traveling is my favorite pastime. My favorite pastime is traveling. So traveling here is being used as a noun, not a verb. Let's look at one that has an infinitive. Jamie loves to sing. Jamie would be our subject. Loves is our verb. And she loves what? She loves to sing. To sing is being used as a direct object, but it is this action. The action of singing is what she loves. So we draw our stilt shape. For infinitives, we do that shape that looks similar to a prepositional phrase with to on the slanted line and sing on the horizontal line. And that would be the entire sentence. Now, here is that sentence I was talking about using is as a helping verb. Gertrude is traveling to Rome. We have is traveling is our verb for Gertrude. Gertrude is our subject. What she is doing is traveling. In that case, this is not a gerund. Gertrude is our subject. Is traveling is our verb. This is different from the sentence up here, where the pastime is traveling. Traveling and the pastime are the same thing. The pastime itself is this action of traveling. Down here, Gertrude and traveling are not the same thing. You could not say traveling is Gertrude like you could with our first sentence where traveling is a pastime. So in this case, traveling is just a verb. To roam is a prepositional phrase that describes our verb, but we haven't gotten to that yet in your lesson, so we're going to leave that out. Now, one other kind of verbal that we haven't talked about yet are called participles. Participles are adjectives that come from verbs. They end with ing or ed, some end with t. They're those past and present participles that you should have been learning about in your grammar class. And again, infinitives can also be adjectives. Gerunds are not up here because gerunds cannot be adjectives. A gerund is always a noun. So gerunds and participles can both end in ing. Gerunds are nouns and participles are adjectives. To diagram a participle, you do this shape here and you write the participle across it. And then our infinitives we've already talked about. To draw them as an adjective, since we can't draw our shape on an angled line, we show it connecting to the noun being described and then have a horizontal line to draw it on. A regular adjective would have just gone right here. But in order to do this shape here as an adjective, we have to add this extra line. Let's look at this first sentence. Having finished, she submitted her test. So she submitted a test is the core element of our sentence. She submitted being our subject and verb. She submitted what? A test. That's our direct object. And then we look at this phrase, having finished. Having finished is giving you more information about she. She has finished the test. In this case, having finished is a participial phrase. So to draw that, we have this shape here. but this participle is 2 words long. Because it's 2 words long, we put 1 word on this line and the other word on this line. If this word have is with your participle, it's going to be 2 words long. We're going to see in just a minute what you do when your participle is only 1 word long. And then we add her under test as an adjective. So our participial phrase, having finished, describes her, so it goes underneath the pronoun she. This next sentence has an infinitive acting as an adjective. The blue house is the place to meet. Is our linking verb. What is the place to meet? House. House is our subject. And then house is what? House is the place. That is our predicate nominative, renaming house. And then to meet is telling you more about the place. Which place? The place to meet. So to draw that as an adjective, we're not going to try to draw our stilt sideways. Instead, we draw our adjective line, and then we do a straight line to give us space to draw that infinitive. And it would look like this. The remainder of words are regular adjectives. It was the house was blue, and it was the place. But that new element here, to meet, is an infinitive describing the place. Now let's look at one more sentence that has a participle that's just 1 word long. The puppy licked the melted ice cream. In this case, the subject and verb is puppy and licked. That's the subject and the action. Our direct object would be ice cream. Puppy licked what? He licked ice cream. Melted is an adjective describing the ice cream, but it's not a regular adjective like vanilla ice cream. Melted comes from a verb, something can melt, so it's saying he licked up the ice cream that had melted, that this action had happened. So we draw this as a participle, which means we're going to draw it on this shape. This is how we're going to draw a participle that's an adjective and only 1 word long. When they're 2 words, you put 1 on each part of the line, but if it's only 1 word long, the melted ice cream, we draw it across. And then we have a few other adjectives to add the. So this is how we add those verbals acting as adjectives. Now, this next part shows how to diagram verbal phrases. Because they act like or they come from a verb, they can have other elements that these words wouldn't normally have. Mostly objects, direct objects. So because they have elements of being both an adjective and a verb, or elements of being both a noun and a verb, they have these extra elements. A regular adjective or a regular adverb is never going to have an object, but these verbals can because they come from a verb, which a verb can have a direct object. If they have an object, it's diagrammed like you would a regular direct object. It just goes with these words that act sort of like verbs. Let's see how it works with this sentence here. Having finished the library book, James returned it. The core independent clause here, James returned it, is where we find our subject and our verb. James returned it. Our subject, our verb, and our direct object. Having finished the library book describes James. James has finished the library book, but it doesn't say that as a verb. It uses it as an adjective. So we place our participial phrase under James. Having finished is our participle, but there's also an object to go with it. Having finished what? having finished book. And then all nouns can always have adjectives under it, including these objects. So we place the and library underneath the book. Having finished book, and then the book and library book. So this is a participial phrase. Let's look at another one. Learning a new language takes perseverance. Our verb is takes. What takes perseverance? Learning a new language. So this whole phrase acts as our subject. Takes goes here as our verb. And now we have this gerund phrase to diagram. We draw our stilt sort of shape and our stairs, but we're going to make this a little bit longer because we have to leave room for an object. Learning, and then our object learning what? Learning a language. Language is the object. And then a and new describe the language. And then perseverance is our direct object. It takes what? It takes perseverance. So you can see how it could just say learning takes perseverance, but to give more information, we have an object. Learning a language takes perseverance. Now let's look at another one. We're going to compare these two sentences that are similar but diagrammed very differently. Jessica's chore was mowing the lawn. Was is our linking verb here. Mowing is not being used as an action verb because our subject is chore. The chore wasn't doing the action of mowing something. The chore didn't mow anything. So chore is our subject. Was is our linking verb. And the chore was the action of mowing the lawn. So it is a predicate nominative that's a gerund phrase. The chore was mowing, and lawn is that object. And Jessica's tells you whose chore it was. So this has a gerund phrase in it. The chore is your subject, was is your linking verb, and what was the chore? The chore was to mow the lawn. In this sentence, it's very different. Jessica is our subject, and she was doing the action of mowing the lawn. Mowing and Jessica are not the same thing. Mowing is not being used as a noun here to rename Jessica. It is showing you what she's doing. So this is a regular verb. Jessica is our subject. And what was she doing? She was mowing. She was mowing what? The lawn, our direct object. So in this sentence, we have a linking verb with a predicate nominative. You can also try rearranging the sentence. Mowing the lawn was Jessica's chore. You couldn't do that here. You would get mowing the lawn was Jessica, which is not what you're going for in this sentence. So you can see how you have to read the sentences closely to really understand what's going on, which is what these diagrams help you do. Now, this next page doesn't go over anything new. I'm going to show you some different sentences with the same word, sort of like we did up here with mowing, to see how it's being used in the sentence. In this first sentence, it says, I enjoy playing cards, meaning I like to play card games. In this case, we have I as the subject, the verb is enjoy, and I enjoy what? I enjoy this activity called playing cards. So this action called playing cards is my direct object. That's what I enjoy doing. So we have a gerund phrase. playing. Playing what? Playing cards. So this one does have a verbal in it. In this sentence, it says, do you have any playing cards? Playing cards is another word for those cards that have hearts and diamonds and spades on them that you use for games. So those are called playing cards. The cards themselves aren't playing. So this word is just a regular adjective telling you the kind of cards they are. It is not being used as an action. Up here, it is talking about the activity of playing, the activity of playing cards, so it's a gerund. Here, the cards aren't taking any action. They're not playing. The cards themselves don't play. So it's just a regular adjective, and we would just diagram it like a regular sentence. You, as our subject, do have cards. Any is an adjective telling you how many, and playing is an adjective telling you the kind of cards. Okay? They could be Uno cards or playing cards or any other kind of cards. This sentence down here uses playing as an adjective, so it's a participle. This is playing as a verbal that's a noun, so it's a gerund. This is playing, not meaning the word to play, just a regular adjective. This is playing, describing the children, but the children are doing this action. The playing children were laughing happily. So playing is describing what the children were doing, so it's a participle. As opposed to this one up here, the cards weren't playing. If we said, do you have any playing cards, and we diagrammed it like this sentence, you would be saying that the cards are playing. Do you have any cards that are playing? That is what we want to do down here. The children who were playing were laughing happily. So to diagram this one, we have children as our subject, were laughing as our verb. That's what they were doing. So we have a helping verb and an action verb. Happily, you may not have covered yet, is an adverb. The describes children. And then playing describes the children, so it's an adjective, but it's also a verb. It is both describing them and showing what they're doing. So it is a participle, and we diagram it in this shape. That shows us that it is both an action and an adjective at the same time. That is all our lessons on verbals. There's one other new element that 7th graders learn, and that's to diagram some dependent clauses. Dependent clauses, a clause is anything with a subject and a verb. So a sentence that has a dependent clause in it is going to have an independent clause and a dependent clause, which means it has two clauses, but it is different from a compound sentence. For dependent clauses, for these sentences that come up in lesson 64, there's going to be a relative pronoun that is describing some antecedent from a previous part of the sentence. Let's look at this one about Aristotle. Aristotle, who was a student of Plato, wrote the Organon. Our independent clause is this part. Aristotle wrote the Organon. The dependent clause is this middle part, who was a student of Plato. You have to first be able to separate your dependent clause from your independent clause, which you should be learning about in your grammar class, and then you can diagram it. You always diagram the independent clause first. So we have Aristotle, wrote this book titled The Organon. Then to diagram our dependent clause, who was a student of Plato, we have to see what the relative pronoun is describing. This who is referring to Plato. So we are going to need to connect those together. Who is our subject of this clause. Was is the verb of this clause. And we have the predicate nominative student. and then some adjectives describing the student, a and of Plato. And now we have to connect them together. We connect them by drawing a dotted line from the word being described or the word being renamed to the pronoun. It's like our conjunctions, but we don't need to add anything on the line. This word functioning like a conjunction is also the subject of this clause. So you don't write anything here. You simply draw the dotted line to show you how the two elements of the sentence are connected together. Let's do one more sentence with these relative pronouns. Jenny enjoyed playing soccer, which taught her perseverance. Our independent clause is that first half. Jenny enjoyed playing soccer. And our dependent clause is the second half, which taught her perseverance. First, we diagram our independent clause. Jenny is our subject. Enjoyed is our verb. And she is enjoying the action of playing soccer. So we actually have a gerund direct object here. Playing soccer. That's what she enjoys. And then in our dependent clause, which taught her perseverance, which is the subject of that dependent clause, and taught is the verb of that dependent clause. And then it taught her what? It taught her perseverance, our direct object. Now in this first sentence, these two were connected together. The who and Aristotle were the same thing. Down here, which is taking the place of playing soccer. It doesn't say Jenny taught herself perseverance. So which is not describing Jenny. Which is taking the place of playing soccer. Playing soccer taught her perseverance. So we draw our dotted line from this word which all the way over to playing soccer. Now it is okay to diagram your second diagram off to the side if you want, as long as ultimately this section of the line connects to the which section of the line, because which is taking the place of playing soccer. You can read it as that. Playing soccer taught perseverance. Now this last element is diagramming adverb clauses. An adverb clause is the same as saying a subordinating clause. They use subordinating conjunctions. They are very similar to compound sentences because you'll have two clauses that act independently, but there's that subordinating conjunction between them. You always have your independent clause first and your dependent clause second, even if they're written in a different order. This is different from these up here because the connecting word is an element of the sentence. It is a pronoun. Down here, they're conjunctions, not pronouns, so they have a conjunction on that dotted line. Here's our first sentence. Because he was tired, James went to bed early. We have our dependent clause always starts with a subordinating conjunction because, I have a typo here. And our independent clause, James went to bed early. We diagram our independent clause first. So first we're going to write James went. And these elements are adverb phrases and adverbs. If you haven't learned about them yet, don't worry. But to bed would tell you where he went. And early tells you when he went. So they are both adverbs. Then we diagram our dependent clause without our subordinating conjunction. Our subject, verb, and in this case, predicate adjective would be he was tired. Tired tells you how he was feeling, so it's a predicate adjective. And then we connect them together. James went to bed early because he was tired. So because he was tired tells you why he went there. Usually, these are going to connect your verbs together. You can see how up here it's connecting those simple predicates together. So we have a dotted line between went and was with our subordinating conjunction because. And we're going to capitalize that because it's the start of the sentence. But notice we still diagrammed this half first because it's our independent clause. Let's look at one more sentence. We're going to compare it to a different one. We traveled to Rome after we visited Athens. After we visited Athens is our dependent clause. Our independent clause is we traveled to Rome. So we start with the first half. We traveled to Rome is a prepositional phrase telling us where we traveled. And then our clause here, we visited, is our subject and our verb in our second clause, our dependent clause. And we visited what? We visited Athens. And they are connected with this subordinating conjunction after. So we connect traveled. Let's see if I can make this a little smaller. Traveled to visited, and we place our word after as our subordinating conjunction that connects them from simple predicate to simple predicate. Now, these are sentences with two clauses in them, an independent clause and a dependent clause. If you take a look at this sentence, it looks very similar to this one here, but it does not have two complete clauses. We traveled to Rome after visiting Athens. Visiting Athens is not a clause because there's no subject and verb. There's no subject telling us we visited. It doesn't say who's visiting in this part. That's because after here is not a subordinating conjunction, it's a preposition, and we have the prepositional phrase after visiting Athens. So let's diagram this briefly. Our sentence begins with we traveled. And then we have to Rome, telling us where we traveled. And after visiting Athens tells us when we traveled. And visiting is a gerund phrase again. Visiting Athens is a noun that tells us both what we were doing and it's acting as a noun. So after what? After we did this action of visiting Athens. So it's going to be diagrammed this way. Visiting is our gerund, and the object of that gerund is Athens. So verbals like these take a while to learn. Just remember that they come from verbs and they have elements of verbs in them. They're showing you that something happened, but within the sentence itself, they are acting as some sort of other part of speech, like a noun or an adjective.